and we can put some questions to our guest, because I'm pleased to say I'm joined by Helen Dewdney, who's a consumer expert. She also goes by the name The Complaining Cow. That's your name, not mine, I must say. Helen, let's start with that number, 35,000 tickets a day. That's an astonishing figure.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's just, I mean, what else can you say other than it is just incredible? And so many of them don't get challenged as well. That's the thing.
What legal rights do people have when it comes to these fines?
Well, certainly challenge them. I mean, they're not actually fines, they're invoices, technically. But
just explain that for us. They're not fines, they're invoices.
Yeah, they're actually an invoice for you to pay, to say something rather than a fine, which is the council kind of ones, are the notices.
Okay.
But it's technicality, really. You still have to pay it. But it's certainly worth, when you are, like when you've seen the picture, when you're actually taking your ticket and everything, is to keep all that proof, keep all that evidence, because we still hear about people who are saying that you haven't even paid. Well, here's my proof that I've paid. You know, to take photos, or if the machine is out of order, or if there aren't any signs, it's always going to be helpful to have that evidence, so that when you appeal, if you do appeal, you've got that with you. So it is always worth appealing if you think it's been unfair. And it is also worth noting that quite often it's the people who are sending out those parking invoices are actually not the landowner. So if, for example, you're in a supermarket and you've only gone over by 1 minute, or there was an emergency, or there was an accident or something, you can appeal on mitigating circumstances and also try the landowner and say, can you put in a word for me, please?
OK, well, that leads me very nicely onto this first message from Russ in Blackburn. He said, I received a parking ticket while using the mother and baby space as a supermarket, legitimately, but they didn't look to see the child seats through the tinted rear windows. What should he do then?
So I would write to the supermarket there, because they're probably, with the supermarkets, you usually need a badge to show that you're in the parent and child bay. So it probably, even if they didn't look at the child seats, they didn't have the sticker. But it would be worth going back to the supermarket and saying, where is my sticker that I should have had for the car, and then actually use that as evidence, and then go back to both the supermarket and the parking firm and say, here's my evidence that I was actually allowed to park in that space.
Let me read you a few more of these 5-phone tickets, if you don't mind. I've got to start with Benjamin from Manchester, who says, ignorance is not an excuse. I've never had any kind of parking ticket or penalty charge notice. Simply follow common sense and vigilance. So that's Benjamin from Manchester, but there are quite a few others who have had experiences. Mike from Huddersfield, he thinks all private parking firms should have CCTV to prove their case, and this would prevent them from double charging, which is something that he says he's been victim of. Andreas from Cardiff says he's a blue badge holder. He's had treatment for leukemia. In the last 6 weeks, he's received 2 fines for a total of £270 from 2 private parking firms. On both occasions, they claimed to have sent an initial letter with a reduced fine if paid within 14 days. Not so. So he didn't get that initial letter, and they've gone straight to the bigger fine. And I think it's worth saying as well, these are people in vulnerable situations sometimes, aren't they? And it can be really worrying to get these kinds of letters. Absolutely, and it is really stressful, and he should challenge that with his evidence. But that's why we need to see the government moving quickly on the parking bill that got the royal assent exactly 5 years ago today. Well, and that's another question. Why hasn't there been action from the government? They've promised to move on this. Yep, that it was meant to happen a couple of years ago. They had a challenge from the parking firms who didn't like what was proposed, unsurprisingly, because there was going to be a cap on the amount that they could charge and lots of other things. But it was the consultation closed in early October last year, and there still has been no news. And when they're challenged, they just say it's coming. There's no date or news about when it's going to happen. The 5-phone is still buzzing. I'm going to read you one from Terry in Mansfield now. He was sent a parking fine for a subway in Bournemouth when he challenged it to say it couldn't possibly have been his car. He was on an aeroplane on holiday. It came back, they rejected it. He sent them photos of himself on holiday, they still rejected it. They insisted he must pay. He said, no chance, I'll see you in court. And he still hasn't had his court date in 5 years. So they didn't chase him in the end. No, quite. And I think
They do just trying to batter you down. And I think, you can go through the appeals process. So you go through the internal appeals process, and then you can go to the IPC or BPA, whichever they are a member of. They have to be, otherwise the DVLA wouldn't release details. And then, say if you think you've got all that evidence, then go to court, because we hear lots of times when people actually threaten that, here's my evidence, you're not noticing the evidence. It doesn't go to court.
OK, great advice from you, Helen. Thank you. I think you'll have been a very positive voice for lots of our viewers here tonight. So